We lock bedroom doors. They barely had walls. We scheduled date nights. They slept beside goats, in-laws, and firewood. And yet, medieval couples still managed to find privacy, spark intimacy, and hold on to emotional connection in the most crowded, chaotic homes imaginable. Forget everything you think you know about medieval life. This isn't about fairy tale castles or secret love letters. This is about one-room huts, public judgment, and couples who somehow carved out personal space without having any at all. How did they do it? What tricks, rituals, and raw determination kept love alive in homes with zero privacy? One of the answers involves bed curtains. Another, community forgiveness ceremonies that doubled as relationship therapy. And the most surprising, a carved spoon handle that might have meant more than any love poem. By the end of this episode, you won't just understand medieval intimacy, you'll start rethinking how we define connection today. Most people in medieval Europe lived in homes that had no private corners. Entire families shared a single room with livestock, tools, and daily chaos. Kitchens, sleeping areas, birth spots, and workspaces all overlapped. These multi-purpose huts left almost no room for silence or separation. In modern terms, it would be like trying to find romance in a crowded dormitory. But couples didn't just survive, they adapted. A standard peasant dwelling from the 12th to the 14th century measured around 20 to 30 square meters. That space had to accommodate parents, children, perhaps grandparents, even pigs and sheep. The hearth sat in the center, smoke drifting through the roof timbers. Beds, when they existed as separate platforms, were often shared by more than one person. Walls made of wattle and daub held in little sound insulation. A sneeze or a coughing fit echoed across the room, and yet people found ways to carve out intimacy. Privacy in medieval life wasn't about walls. It was about timing and gestures. Couples developed ritualistic patterns. One spouse might fetch water or walk to the well at twilight while the other prepared bedding. Children were sent on errands to free up short intervals. Ceremonial events such as feast days or church services pulled people away from the home, creating precious silent windows. Curtains made of cloth could be hung over the bed frame to simulate separation. In larger peasant houses, slight elevations or lofts created symbolic space. These tactics didn't offer complete isolation, but they created the illusion of choice. The first twist lies in the fact that intimacy didn't vanish in cramped conditions. Couples found connection by inventing subtle codes, whispered prayers before dawn, touches hidden behind ritual work like grain processing, fleeting glances beneath flickering lamplight. These were not political protests, they were daily responses to cramped reality. Every action took on meaning precisely because space was restricted. Church teachings reinforced the need for intimacy within marriage, yet imposed strict rules. Sex was encouraged for procreation and unity but limited by ecclesiastical law. There were forbidden days, Sundays, holy festivals, fasting periods. Contraceptives were condemned. Thomas Aquinas wrote that marital duty was essential to the sacrament but had to align with divine order. Failing to provide sexual obligation could result in annulment. The Church, therefore, acknowledged a need for intimacy even while policing its expression. In modern terms, it's like having rigid office rules but still expecting teams to connect. Medieval couples learned to navigate between confession booths and bed frames. They negotiated space inside and outside of dogma. A peasant husband might finish church confession early to return home and use the brief silence before supper. A wife might time her menstrual period to follow religious guidelines, yet sweeten the gap with a carved token hidden on a wooden beam. In one English manor record from the 13th century, a couple received instructions from a local priest about the proper timing of relations to align with fasting days, yet the record added that they were affectionate when alone by the hearth. The note shows that one could be devout and still search for connection. Meanwhile, small architectural choices mattered. Even a curtain of rough linen, suspended by horsehair from rafters, offered symbolic camouflage. It didn't silence the room, but it marked territory. A lofted sleeping platform elevated by just half a meter felt like separation. Minor elevation created psychological privacy. Where we moderns think of rooms, medieval couples thought of performance. Then there were seasonal escapes. In warmer months, couples sometimes slept outdoors in a warmed barn or field shelter, sharing nearest space with animals but enjoying cooler air and distance from the main structure. The hayloft above the stable was a well-known place for lovers seeking brief solitude away from the hearth. That initial twist becomes clear. Despite suffocating proximity, intimacy survived in cracks, ritual, timing, symbolic architecture. It wasn't about luxury or romance as today understands it. It was about emotional negotiation. Bad-smelling smoke, creaking boards, all became part of the backdrop, not a barrier. At the end of each day, couples weren't collapsing from frustration. They were strategizing small escapes, sending a child to the well, hanging a scrap of cloth, sharing a whispered prayer. These micro-actions built their emotional scaffolding and turned bleak housing into livable affection. Enough little moments glinted into meaning. Life in cramped medieval homes carried more than physical limits. It carried communal pressure and moral oversight. Intimacy was not only hard to engineer, it was risky. Neighbors could hear, church courts could judge, and personal desires could become public drama. Yet couples continued to seek privacy by weaving conflict and desire together. Walls were thin and shared. Any squeak or loud whisper traveled. Suspicious behavior was noticed and reported. Ecclesiastical courts handled cases of adultery, fornication, and neglect of marital obligations. A neighbor's whispered accusation could trigger formal inquiry, with penalties including public penance, fines, or even flogging. Evidence rarely required certainty. Rumor and moral policing carried weight. Take Agnes of Lydd, accused in 1370 of habitual relations with another man. Her punishment came from a woman who claimed to have heard sounds from the wall. Agnes was made to stand before the parish, wearing sackcloth and reciting repentance aloud. Repentance became a public performance, but the intimate act itself had no physical proof. Scandal came from accusation and exposure. Church doctrine added tension. Marriage was a sacrament, and sex inside it was both essential and regulated. Sex outside the permitted schedule was sinful. Couples who delayed having children invited suspicion. Those who refused marital intimacy might face annulment or community censure. A 14th-century record from southern France shows a husband who was excommunicated for refusing relations, seen as opposing divine order and jeopardizing lineage. To navigate this deepening conflict, couples adapted. They shifted intimacy to barns or bathhouses, or waited until festivals emptied homes. Fields became sanctuaries. A farmer might arrange overnight hay shifts or linger after evening tavern gatherings. A couple might meet near the well under cover of dusk. These maneuvers prioritized stealth over passion, turning survival into strategy. Even mundane tasks could become intimate. Share evening supper near the hearth became a coded gesture. Washing garments together by the river provided physical closeness under the guise of work. Carving small symbols into beams at night while children slept became secret expressions of care. In short, couples turned labor into love. Contrasts with today are stark. Modern couples swap flirty texts during lunch breaks or send photos in private chats. Medieval couples slit grain sacks or clipped leather tokens. Where we expect solitude and apps, they expected suspicion and communal monitoring. Yet desire remained robust. Rituals replaced quiet rooms. But conflict seeped deeper when accusations escalated into scandal. A servant accused her mistress's husband of secret visits. A lord's daughter was disciplined for carrying a message. Damage to reputation threatened dowries and estate alliances. Marriage negotiations were soured. Records might record an illegitimate heir. Children born after scandal risked legal uncertainty. Still, discretion mattered. Villagers often tolerated unseen liaisons if no disruption followed. Affairs stayed underground when no public order was violated. Silent washing, indirect glances, nothing explicit, a code that neighbors recognized but ignored. In families where everyone knew everyone, silence could be survival. Emotional rivalry also heightened stakes inside marriage. A wife neglected might resent sharing space with in-laws. A husband forced into intimacy or frustrated by childlessness might lash out or seek companionship elsewhere. Ecclesiastical courts took both complaints. Public reconciliation sometimes followed suits where confession and penance restored companionship. But the tension often fractured households. Amid that, intimacy became layered and coded. A carved token, a hidden ribbon, a shared walk outside harvest fields, all became declarations of loyalty. Modern couples might share playlists or snap rings, Medieval couples sewed initials on bed linen or left carved hearts in the wood. Enduring conflict and desire taught couples resilience. Many surviving marriage records show spouses who reconciled after scandal and remained together for decades. They learned to frame conflict into collective survival, negotiating love amid expectations. The story escalates again, tracking how emotional bonds shaped household power and ritual responses to crisis. Once couples learned to create moments of private space in busy medieval homes, a pivot occurred. Intimacy became not just emotional connection but strategic survival. Living in one-room huts meant every gesture carried weight. Shared breath, hand placement, timing all signaled loyalty, defiance, or desperation. The second major escalation in the story is that intimacy turned political, turning household relationships into emotional battlegrounds. Medieval marriage balanced duty, hierarchy, and desire. Women were expected to bear children and keep labor going. Men needed heirs and loyalty. When couples struggled with infertility or conflict, their private failures became taxable communal issues. A couple refusing relations faced scrutiny from parish priests. A marriage negotiator might turn silent nights into evidence of disobedience. One 14th-century French case described a husband summoned to ecclesiastical court for dereliction of duty because his wife claimed he ignored her demands. Intimacy was also a bargaining tool. A wife might delay relations to influence inheritance terms or marital negotiation. A husband might press for opposition through ritual withholding. These codes fueled small-scale power plays inside household walls. Court records sometimes mention wives who demanded better provisions in return for compliance. That negotiation happened in spaces so cramped that a folded linen might carry more meaning than words. For couples whose emotional bond ran deep, intimacy intertwined with hardship. Famine, illness, infant death, long winters, these conditions tightened couples together. A shared night coughing near the hearth, blankets pulled close, praying amidst grief, these experiences forged emotional resilience. A surviving plague widow and her second spouse, recorded in 15th-century England, spoke tenderly of intimacy as comfort amid terror, even as the room held multiple bodies of mourned kin. Where modern couples escaped to retreats, medieval lovers escaped to seasonal work. Women might harvest hay at dawn, then find their husband among the rows. Lovers might plan meetings during grain winnowing or communal berry picking. These routines turned labor into liaison. In one rural account from Germany, a pair of peasants carved notched marks inside a toolshed, each notch marking time spent together apart from family. Emotional conflict emerged when household power imbalance overlapped with intimacy failure. In some cases, husbands abandoned wives accused of barrenness or infidelity, seeking annulment through canon lawyers. Women found themselves cast out, stigma in tow. Families defended their kin, paying fines, arranging remarriage, or relocating to escape shame. That punishment created pain, but also occasionally led couples to renegotiate their bond openly before church authorities. Despite that risk, emotional codes thrived. Token exchange remained prevalent. Handmade wooden beads, sewn fabric scraps, carved initials. Hidden hearts in eaves turned into secret messages. Rival couples tattooed linen hem patterns as validation. Where we rely on private chats, medieval couples relied on craftsmanship and covert symbolism. Partly because scandal sometimes boiled over, couples learned discretion. Villagers tolerated emotional bonds so long as no overt drama unfolded. Spouses negotiated affection through silent code rather than confrontation. Some courts recorded forgiven liaisons. If crime stayed hidden, peace was often restored. That normalization allowed couples to keep intimacy alive beneath the surface. As daily surveillance waned, these reactive codes strengthened emotional connection. Couples still lived in the same space as children, animals, in-laws, but their interior lives carved lines invisible to the naked eye. A glance, a token, a borrowed chore, each small act anchored trust in chaos. The escalation pivoted intimacy into something bigger than private feeling. It became shared survival and household strategy. Emotional bonds shaped power dynamics, workload expectations, and social standing. But when crisis hit, they also offered crisis-proof shelter. The narrative momentum continues building as we move toward household consequences next, how scandal, penance, and community responses created dramatic turning points in couples' lives under thatched roofs. When private patterns of intimacy failed or became visible beyond the couple, consequences rippled through entire communities. Scandal stopped being whispered gossip and became public performance. Ecclesiastical courts, village elders, and sometimes even feudal lords stepped in. The crescendo arises when secret rituals are exposed and couples must face social, legal, and emotional fallout. Canonical trials documented cases of adultery or premarital sex. Women accused were often subjected to public penance, walking barefoot, wearing sackcloth, or standing silently at church services. Men faced fines, threatened inheritance, and sometimes violent retribution from offended families. Records show cases across England, France, and Germany throughout the 13th to 15th centuries where punishments were meted out based on testimony, rumor, or symbolic acts like a ribbon exchanged in secret. Families often intervened before courts could. A scandal-tainted marriage might be salvaged through symbolic gestures, marrying off the accused quickly, paying fines, or publicly affirming the household's unity via feast or ceremony. One German chronicle describes a lord demanding a public banquet after discovering an affair involving his daughter. The seducer had to host it in restitution, effectively repaying the family. Decisions about dowry, dowager rights, and inheritance changed hands based on moral compliance. Emotional consequences were deeper. Women lost dowries, were barred from housing rights or inheritance. Their children risked being labeled illegitimate. Once scandal hit, trust cracked. Husbands lost face, wives lost security, children lost legal standing. In small villages, social exile could equal ruin. Isolation was worse than any physical punishment. Even so, some couples navigated restoration through repentance. Models of public contrition emerged where couples performed penance together. Shared humiliation in front of the congregation became a ritual of emotional repair. One French record notes a couple that, after a scandal, fasted together for 40 days, publicly confessed, then restored their household's honor. These acts reframed intimacy from hidden desire into community-verified loyalty. Daily life resumed after scandal, but trust had to be rebuilt. Couples re-established routines, shared meals, whispered blessings, concealed messages. Household tasks regained meaning as joint effort. Emotional bonds were re-anchored in shared labor by the hearth, where shame gave way to an opportunity for deeper connection. Modern parallels appear in public apologies and damage control. Today, scandal often prompts PR moves or social distancing. Medieval couples used penance, confession, ritual re-entry. Restored through communal grace rather than quiet exile. In some cases, long-standing marriages outlasted public scandal, proving resilience wins over taboo. Tokens regained relevance. Hidden carved initials, secret ribbons, relics returned after confiscation, small objects became signals of reconciliation. Where today couples post apology notes, medieval lovers carved symbols back into beams or returned gifts quietly. These silent codes communicated patience, loyalty, and new beginnings. Through crisis, the crescendo teaches us that emotional recovery can be communal. Intimacy reborn publicly could be stronger, grounded in shared vulnerability. Love no longer only private, it had to survive public judgment. This crescendo sets the stage for a reflective payoff. Intimacy under pressure isn't fragile, it evolves. And that evolution leads to a rich final insight for modern relationships. Couples in cramped medieval homes didn't just endure physical closeness, they learned to shape emotional intimacy from constraint. Amid constant community presence, limited architecture, and moral regulation, they crafted connection that outlasted hardship, scandal, and loss. The final reflection shows us how intimacy under pressure becomes resilience, ritual, and real human bonding. What medieval couples built wasn't fantasy romance, it was routine devotion. Shared glances at dawn, whispered prayers before chores, small carved tokens hidden behind beams, each micro-gesture bound hearts in ways architecture never could. These weren't dramatic declarations, they were lived experiences in tiny thresholds between chaos and meaning. Their daily rituals happened inside communal rhythms. Feast days and fasts pulled villagers away from home and offered couples rare silence. A pilgrim returning from a distant shrine brought back relics and whispered news that renewed longing. Shared labor by flickering hearthlight became emotional choreography. These routines turned labor into liaison and necessity into intimacy. Modern relationships often rely on curated spaces, hotel stays, digital blackout nights, playlist messages. Those feel luxurious. Medieval intimacy had no luxury, Just carved initials on grain sacks, ribbons hidden in thatch, and shared warmth in swollen huts. But it was enduring. Many documented medieval couples remained married for decades despite infanticide, famine, or scandal. Their bond was forged through negotiation rather than escape. Public scandal sometimes offered a strange benefit. Penitential rituals, fasting, confession, public acknowledgement, became healing ceremonies. Couples repented together and emerged emotionally united. Where modern cancel culture fosters division, medieval repentance invited reintegration. Their shared humiliation could become shared restoration. These stories teach us that intimacy isn't about perfect conditions. It's about practices. It's about small repeated actions that signal loyalty and understanding. It's about negotiation, compromise, and coded ritual. Emotional life is built daily in whispered moments, not grand gestures. So what can modern viewers take from these medieval lives? First, that connection endures not because of space, but because of attention. Second, that trust and intimacy can be repaired, even publicly, if handled with humility and patience. Third, that small rituals, like a hidden note, a subtle carving, a silent shared chore, carry emotional weight. Think of a moment today you value, a soft glance, a secret message, or a silent gesture. What would happen if you repeated it daily, in spite of noise, distractions, or crowd? Medieval couples didn't wait for privacy, they made it. They lived in one-room homes without walls and turned pressure into presence. They lived under scrutiny and made intimacy into ritual. They didn't romanticize their era, they treated connection as survival. They had no privacy, no true silence, and no walls between them and their neighbors. Yet medieval couples built bonds that lasted through famine, plague, scandal, and death. That wasn't because life was easy, it was because they turned tiny moments into meaning. Ask yourself, what would you do if your love had no walls? What ritual keeps your connection grounded? What unnoticed moment in your day means everything? Share your thoughts below, your perspective matters. And if tracing these hidden stories of human resilience speaks to you, subscribe to Medieval Daily. Because history isn't just a past worth reading, it's a guide for being human.